I always believed I had control over many things: loneliness, heartbreak, even my own desires. But that day I realized how everything had quietly slipped through my fingers. That moment marked the beginning of the most complicated and forbidden chapter of my life. As I recall what happened, my breath quickens, my heart pounds. This isn't just a confession. It's the story of how a woman can lose herself in loneliness, passion, and tangled emotions. I am 55, though people are often surprised when they hear my age. It has been 10 years since I divorced Edgar after his betrayal, and to this day no one truly understands why. I have always been an elegant woman, one who draws attention effortlessly. But no matter how strong I appear, the past decade of solitude has carved an emptiness deep within me, an emptiness that lingers in the stillness of the night. That morning I was getting ready to meet my friend Emma for coffee. Like me, she was divorced, and our conversations often revolved around old memories, the silence in our homes, and the bitter disappointments of love. I wore a fitted mini-skirt and a light blouse, glancing at my reflection before leaving. A faint smile played on my lips. "I'm still attractive," I whispered, as if reminding myself of a truth I sometimes forgot. At the cafe, Emma and I sat by the window, the hum of conversations and the scent of fresh coffee surrounding us. As she spoke, my gaze wandered outside, and that's when I saw him, Luke, my nephew. He was 25, cheerful, always polite. But today he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was someone who immediately caught my attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an effortless confidence that was impossible to ignore. Later I would learn his name, Ryan. He was 27, strikingly handsome, but it wasn't just his looks that held my attention. It was something else, something unspoken. When his eyes met mine through the glass, a slow, electric current ran through me. I forced myself to look away, pretending to listen to Emma, but my mind was elsewhere. A few minutes later, Luke walked in to greet me. After a brief exchange, he left, but not before introducing Ryan. His handshake was firm, his deep brown eyes lingering on mine just a little too long. There was an intensity in his gaze that unsettled me. Or perhaps, thrilled me. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself that my reaction to Ryan had been nothing more than fleeting curiosity. But as I approached my front door, I found a large box waiting for me, the television and sound system I had ordered. Excitement quickly turned to frustration as I realized I wouldn't be able to set it up alone. Then I remembered Luke's words, "Call me if you need help." Without thinking too much, I dialed his number. When he answered, he told me he would come over, with Ryan. A strange anticipation curled inside me, an unfamiliar thrill I refused to acknowledge. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded in my chest. Luke walked in first, his usual carefree energy filling the space. But when Ryan stepped inside, his gaze locked onto mine, and in that moment, something shifted. There was an unspoken awareness between us, a silent pull I couldn't ignore. As they worked on setting up the system, I stood back, watching. Luke was animated, chatting easily, while Ryan was focused, precise in his movements. But every so often, I caught him stealing glances at me, glances that lingered just a second too long. I was still in my mini-skirt and blouse, and suddenly I became acutely aware of the way the fabric clung to me. Maybe it was my own imagination, or maybe it was the way Ryan's eyes followed my movements, but a quiet thrill coursed through me. At one point, he handed me a cable, and as our fingers brushed, a jolt of heat surged between us. We both pulled back instinctively, but the moment hung in the air, charged and undeniable. Ryan smiled faintly, murmuring an apology, but his voice was too smooth, too calm, and it stirred something deep within me. As they finished the setup, I thanked them both. "Living alone, it's hard to handle things like this," I said lightly. Ryan's lips curved into a subtle smile. "Don't hesitate to call us for things like this." His voice was polite, yet laced with something deeper, something that made my pulse quicken. Turning to Luke, I added, "Once it's all set up, I'm inviting you both for the first movie night. You have to come." Luke grinned. "Sounds great. Movie nights are always fun." Ryan only nodded, his expression unreadable, but his eyes remained fixed on me. "I'll make some coffee," I said, needing an excuse to step away and steady my thoughts. As I prepared the coffee, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting Luke, but it was Ryan. He stood in the doorway, his arms loosely crossed, his presence filling the small kitchen. For a long moment he simply looked at me. His gaze traveled slowly, from the hem of my skirt to the delicate curve of my shoulders, before finally meeting my eyes again. A silent heat passed between us, thick and undeniable. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice warm, steady. I smiled, though my heart was racing. "No need to thank me. If anything, I made more work for you by choosing such a massive TV. Ryan chuckled softly, leaning against the table, his large hands gripping the edge with an easy confidence. You seem happy with your choice, he said, his eyes flicking down my body once more before returning to my face. I adjusted my hair, feeling a heat rise inside me. When you live alone, small pleasures like this become more important. His gaze deepened, moving over me as if he were seeing more than just my words. His voice lowered slightly, taking on an intimate edge. Loneliness isn't always a bad thing, he murmured. But sometimes, when you have someone to share it with, everything feels more meaningful. Something about the way he said it made my breath hitch. He wasn't just making small talk. He was saying something more. My eyes drifted, against my better judgment, over the strong line of his jaw, the broad frame of his body. I gripped the coffee mugs a little tighter, trying to steady myself. I suppose you're right, I managed to say, but my voice trembled just slightly. Ryan pushed away from the table and took a slow step closer. Now he was near enough that I could feel the warmth of his body, the quiet power in the way he carried himself. Looking directly into my eyes, he said, "If you ever want to test out this system, invite Luke and me over." His words were casual, but his tone was not. And the look in his eyes told me everything. Luke's voice called from the living room, breaking the charged silence between us. "Ryan, can you pass me the cable?" Ryan hesitated for a brief moment, his gaze lingering on mine. The air between us felt thick with something unspoken, something undeniably electric. Then, with a slow nod, he murmured, "I'll be right there." Even as he walked away, his presence remained, a lingering force in the small kitchen, wrapping around me like an invisible thread I couldn't break. I exhaled sharply, my fingers tightening around the warm coffee mug, my heart hammering inside my chest. For the next few minutes, we sat together, chatting lightly as we sipped our coffee. Ryan and Luke finished setting up the system, and I expressed my gratitude. Luke, ever the playful one, grinned. "Enjoy it, Auntie," he teased, his tone light and carefree. Ryan, however, met my eyes with a polite smile, his words softer yet filled with something deeper. "If you need anything else, let us know." And then, just before he turned to leave, his gaze locked onto mine one last time. The moment was brief, but it was enough. The air between us hummed with something fresh, something unshakable. After they left, silence settled over the house. The new TV and sound system stood proudly in front of me, a reminder of their visit. But my mind wasn't on the sleek black screen or the crisp surround sound. It was on him. Ryan. His calm yet commanding presence, the way his voice carried warmth, the way his eyes held mine just a second longer than necessary. As I moved to clean up the coffee cups, something on the table caught my eye. A small flower, delicate yet vibrant, lay beside a folded piece of paper. My breath hitched as I reached for it, my fingers trembling slightly. I unfolded the note, and Ryan's neat, precise handwriting greeted me. "If you ever need anything, you can call me." Below the words was his phone number. A simple gesture, yet it sent my pulse racing. He had left this for me. Quietly. Intentionally. That evening, as I sat in front of my new television, my phone rested in my palm, Ryan's number glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, my mind warring with itself. Should I text him? Should I ignore it? The emotions inside me swirled, spinning wildly, threatening to overpower logic. And then, almost without thinking, I began to type. "Ryan, thank you for the flower. That was very thoughtful of you. If you're free, would you like to join me for coffee or wine while we test out the system?" The moment I hit send, my heart pounded so violently it felt as if it might burst from my chest. I stared at the screen, waiting, nervous anticipation coiling in my stomach. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed and his reply appeared. "That's a wonderful idea, Mia. I'm bringing a bottle of wine over." Minutes later, when I opened the door, Ryan stood there, a bottle of red wine in hand. His confidence, his quiet intensity once again left me speechless. He paid attention to details, the way he carried himself, the way he looked at me. There was something so deliberate about him, something that made my breath catch. "A good wine is essential for a proper system test," he said, his lips curving into that same faint smile that sent a shiver down my spine. As we settled into the couch, glasses in hand, he raised his toward me. "To special moments," he murmured. I lifted mine, clinking it gently against his. "And special people." The way his gaze deepened, the way his eyes locked onto mine, it took my breath away. We turned on the television, music filling the room, but neither of us was really paying attention. The screen flickered, songs played, yet the energy between us pulsed stronger than anything technology could create. The space between us seemed to shrink with every word, every glance, every brush of his arm against mine. "Mia," Ryan said, his voice softer now but firm. "I didn't come here tonight just to try the wine." My pulse quickened. "No?" He shook his head slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "I came because I want to get to know you better." The weight of his words sent a rush of warmth through me. Everything I had been trying to suppress, the excitement, the longing, the sheer thrill of his presence, rose to the surface all at once. I couldn't look away. Slowly, I set my wine glass down on the table and stood up. My fingers reached for the straps of my dress, and as I did, I heard the sharp intake of Ryan's breath. I took a step toward him, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you really want to get to know someone," I murmured, "getting closer is essential." The straps of my dress slipped from my shoulders, cascading to the floor in a soft whisper of fabric. Ryan's gaze roamed over me, raw and unmistakable. His expression darkened, not with hesitation, but with something primal, something undeniable. He moved toward me, deliberate and steady, until he was so close I could feel the heat of his breath against my skin. "Mia," he murmured, his voice deep, laced with something that sent my stomach tumbling. "The fact that a woman like you is this strong and bold makes you even more mesmerizing." My heart raced, but I held his gaze, tilting my head slightly, my lips parting. "Ryan," I whispered. "Being here tonight wasn't just about tasting wine. It was a choice. And I chose to get to know you better." Something in his expression shifted, the last trace of restraint crumbling. His hands found my waist, pulling me against him. His lips met mine, and the world around us blurred into insignificance. The kiss was deep, consuming, unlike anything I had felt before. It wasn't rushed, yet it held an urgency that set my skin on fire. His hands traced the curve of my spine, exploring, claiming. My fingers found his shoulders, gripping him as though anchoring myself to the moment. The soft melody playing from the speakers only heightened the sensation, a backdrop to something infinitely more intoxicating. I barely noticed when he reached for the music system, adjusting the sound. A slow, sensual melody filled the room, wrapping around us like an invisible force. I sank into the couch, breathless, lost in the rhythm of our own movements. My nails scraped against his back, a silent confession of how much I wanted this, how much I wanted him. His whispered words, his unrelenting kisses, the way he worshipped every inch of me, it was overwhelming in the most exquisite way. And when it was over, when the world slowly came back into focus, Ryan lay beside me, his breath steadying. I curled against him, exhaustion and contentment pulling me under. But as the first light of morning crept through the curtains, I stirred. Reaching out, my fingers met empty sheets. My heart skipped. I sat up quickly, scanning the room. My clothes lay scattered on the floor, but Ryan, he was gone. My eyes landed on the coffee table. There, resting atop its smooth surface, was another flower, delicate and soft. And beside it, a folded note. I reached for it, my pulse quickening. As I unfolded the paper, Ryan's familiar handwriting greeted me once more. "I want to take you somewhere special soon. Last night was amazing, but it was only the beginning of what's ahead. I can't wait for what's next." A slow smile spread across my lips as I held the flower between my fingers. A journey filled with sensations I had never experienced before was waiting for me. Yes, last night had been unforgettable. But something told me, this was just the beginning.